Welcome back to another discussion of the Traitors US Season 4. And actually, this is my first video on the Traitors for this channel. So this is pretty funny. I'm saying welcome back when I literally have nothing on Traitors 4. But I'm just going to go ahead and get my thoughts in and just get the ball rolling and get this YouTube channel actually going now. All right, so I'm assuming that you saw the latest episode number 10 here, and we're just going to be discussing the gameplay strategy as a whole, just from my take in general. All right, so the first note I want to make is that Eric and Rob want Natalie banished. I think it's actually really interesting that they really want to go after her, despite Natalie, compared to her Survivor games, it's. I really don't think she's the best target. If anything, they really should have went after Mark, even though that could have brought the heat onto them at the round table. But alas, here we are. And is it gonna open the door for a possible faithful win at the end? Potentially, but we'll have to see where this goes and the further we continue to discuss about this. Second thing I want to know is when they actually got to the breakfast before they found out who was killed, for the first time ever, we saw Rob actually have some decent character development where he's not just like this stone cold killer, right? I never saw his Love Island season, but I heard that he was a bit more emotional on Love Island 6. And so maybe we're starting to see him come more into that familiar character for the Traitors 4. And I would understand why he would even feel guilty. I feel like it would break anybody down at some point, unless you're a freaking psychopath. But like, if you are putting on lies upon lies upon lies for like a week and a half to like 2 weeks, forever, how long this game is, it is going to take a toll. And eventually, at this stage, you are cutting your friends. You're cutting the people that you really never wanted to cut at the beginning of the game. So it's getting really hard for even Eric as well. Like any traitor that gets to this point, this is really the ultimate test of a traitor. Can you separate your emotions from your own thoughts? And to be honest, it's the only way a trader can win. If they can separate those two, they win the money. Compared to my last video, I had no graphic transition, but oh, would you look at that? Kristen got murdered. I was actually really rooting for Kristen. Look, I root for faithfuls and traders. It depends on how they play. Was Kristen playing a awesome game? No, but I also think the online community is so hypercritical on faithfuls playing bad games, and it's like, well, when you put yourself in the shoe, you're more than likely gonna fall in line with believing a bunch of lies rather than knowing that the traders are there. The one benefit that the audience has is we know who the traders are and we know who's playing a bad and a good game. I actually really started to believe that Kristen was going to win this whole thing, especially with her getting onto Eric. I really firmly believed if she wasn't murdered tonight, that Eric really would have been the one gone at the round table. We're gonna see in the future that Kristen's karma is gonna come back and haunt Eric, unfortunately. We'll see how that develops later on. Kristen was the one that really wanted Eric out of the game because she kind of saw the switch up in him as soon as he was the one given the cloak and to become the traitor. And to be faithful that whole time and transition into being a traitor is actually harder than being an OG traitor and an OG faithful, because it shows that you need a personality switch as soon as possible and to be ready to eliminate people left and right. Some people are really good in this role, and then we see people like Eric who, thinks they're playing well. But in the reality is they're kind of falling out of it and they just don't see it. And Rob actually mentioned it on the episode that he needs to speak up at the roundtable. And we'll get into that roundtable a little later on. But speaking of Kristen's karma, Mark actually is starting to catch on that Eric might just be a traitor. Now, it becomes way more important later in the episode, but that is starting to get the ball rolling. There isn't much on it, but Mark is starting to realize maybe Eric isn't really the guy he should trust. And the really interesting part is Eric, even from faithful to a traitor, his moments as a traitor, he feels faithful. even despite him not speaking up as much, he has an innocent persona regardless. That's just the type of person he is. So it makes sense why he has made the final seven. So let's actually get to the biggest part of the episode, and it actually belongs with Tara and Natalie. Now, there is a moment of hope for the faithfuls, because the interesting part is that Tara brought up to Natalie that, hey, Rob is probably a traitor. By the way, that's insane because the last person to accuse Rob of being a traitor was literally Candace, also a conniving, devious little traitor herself. Tara finally put two and two together and went to Natalie, the gamer, and honestly, it was a really smart move because Natalie knows how to talk to people and convince her on her side. Is she playing an aggressive style? Absolutely. But Tara knows Natalie is her go-to girl for this. I actually really think it's a solid strategy because at some point in time, you are going to have to take a risk knowing that you probably are talking to a traitor. Now, has Natalie been suspicious this entire season? Absolutely, even as a faithful. But where do you find that balance? Are you going to be the faithful that's scared to talk to anybody that we have seen in the past? Or are you going to take the risk and tell somebody for the off chance that it does catch a traitor? I'm a firm believer that if you don't take a risk, even if it literally makes you be murdered or get you banished, it's a game that is not well played. I would like if I were in the Traitors, I would rather risk it all because it's a game of all or nothing. And as soon as you don't do what Tara does with Natalie, you lose the whole game. But this is only speaking for the pre-banishment, interestingly enough, because it actually seemed like it was going to work. And we'll get into that a little bit later. Mora has been in literal denial with Rob the entire time, and also a lot of people are probably going to call her dumb. I don't see it that way. Like, do I think that she should be a little more competitive? Yes, but here's the thing, when you have cross references with shows, she comes from Love Island UK and you got Rob from Love Island US, would it really be logical for Mora to break off from Rob? I don't know. Like, I know there's a strategy of faithfuls knowing that somebody is a traitor and still actively working with them, but I think for this case scenario, I don't feel like it's a Danielle and a Brittany situation for season 3 where Brittany kind of knew that Danielle was probably a traitor. Mora, I think, has a bit of blind loyalty. I think she is starting to shift away post banishment. Actually, you can kind of see her thinking. Like, I do think she is rethinking if Rob is actually a faithful or not. We'll have to see at the finale, but if I had to place a firm bet right here, right now, I don't think she would have the guts to banish Rob. And that's just my hot take right now. I'm not really going to be talking about challenges for the Traitors unless it's more of a social challenge that actually has impact, not like the one that we saw in season 4 with the boxes that did not have much impact at all. Mark and Rob fought over money. And it seems not really important in the short term, but long term, I think it has devastating effects specifically for either of them. Now, the first part is if Mark starts to feel a bit more weary about Rob, this is literal evidence against him. Natalie and Tara were saying that Rob was being performative, and Mark actually heard it out and actually started to buy into it quite a bit. And I really see that happening for Mark towards the end of the season. I don't know if it's going to be the final banishment or at the fireplace outside, but I really do think Mark is going to betray Rob. And I think the way that Rob can use it is just to make the move against Mark as soon as possible, whether it is a murder. But I do see Rob and Eric actually not killing Mark and banishing him. Who won the final shield? And that is our boy, Eric. Eric did a wonderful job of, I don't know, cheating. I don't know why production allowed Eric and Tara to compete in this when I think in UK4 somebody sat out with also medical conditions but wasn't allowed to win a shield. So I don't really agree with this on a production standpoint. I think it gives Eric a really unfair advantage. Like, did he win it fairly in the context of the game? Yes, but he also didn't have to spin around the carousel. Okay, maybe Natalie is the one we should push for because she already is the one that was suspicious beforehand. And so maybe we should just go after her. And so here's how the roundtable got really interesting, though, because you think that strategy would be so important until Tara backs away from Natalie, even though introducing the idea that Rob could be a traitor and Natalie just really believing in it and trusting her gut. And we know as a viewer that she's right, but is she able to get the people that don't know to believe in them in particular? But the fact that Tara backed away made Natalie seem so unbelievably guilty. And I was watching that live and I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is Natalie's grave. A gamer's not going to win. And I'm a huge fan of all the gamers. And then they all just suck this season. They all suck. I do think she played the best game she could. I wouldn't say she played the best gamer game she could out there. It's solid given the cast of how anti-gamer they were. This is where Natalie gets banished. Simply because she's a gamer, she's outspoken, and also Rob used the dagger with 2 votes, but we all saw that coming. That's why I barely talked about it. Okay, Rob, let's make our strategy a little more unpredictable so we don't have such a boring season. But actually, with Natalie going out with pretty much all the votes, it was like, what, 6-1? It was actually a really interesting episode. Now, if I were to rank like the Traitors seasons, it would be season 2, 3, 1, and then 4. The dynamic part of this season. I think we're gonna have a really interesting finale. Can it go south and just become, I don't know, a steamroll? Either way, of course, because it is Traitors, but I mean, even then, with that scenario in mind, I don't think it's going to be dull. Because my prediction for the next banishment, since there is one more murder, and we'll get into that later, I think the most obvious banishment that's going to happen is Eric. And this is Kristen's revenge, because she mentioned that Eric wasn't talking a lot at the round tables. And I mean, he's kind of been that way after he accused Tiffany, another gamer, of laughing and killing somebody. But we haven't really seen him perform like that again. Now, it's kind of nice that he wasn't like that because he made such a strong accusation. He pulled back way too much, and now as a traitor, he looks far more suspicious. If he remained faithful the entire time and wasn't given the ultimatum, I do think he would have been maybe one of the best faithfuls that we have seen in a while. All right, but now here's the final prediction of who's going to be murdered. Obviously, we know our shortlist. Tara, Mark, Mora, and Johnny are obviously all on the shortlist, and it is sort of a public murder, I guess. It's just the final theatrics, it's Traitors, it's campy, it's gonna have like that theater, high energy type of vibe to it. And I've really been sitting here and I'm trying to wonder who would actually be the one to be killed here. And so let's go ahead and rule off Tara. I don't think Tara is actually going to be murdered. She's at her breaking point. I don't think the Traitors will follow through and let her quit. And besides, I would actually love to see her redeem herself finally. If the Faithfuls were to win, that she actually gets to see that she finally got the Traitors. It would be nice to know. But I'm really leaning between actually Mark and Mora. That is my assessment for the US Traitors Season 4, Episode 10. Next week, we will see the finale. But hey, if you like this video, make sure to subscribe. I actually have Australian Survivor coming up, and that's going to be my next video, so keep a lookout on that because we will have to do a bunch of episode discussions on that. And of course, I will see you in that next video. I'll see you then.